Om Asato Ma Sadagamaya Tamaso Omaham Jyotirgamaya Mrityormam Amritam Gamaya Avir Maedhi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukha Te Namaham Pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality, and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is truth alone triumphs. Take my title from the Mundaka Upanishad, where it says, Satyam eva jayate nanritam satyena pantha vitato devayana. Truth alone triumphs, not untruth. Through truth alone lies the path of the gods. The English word true, it comes from the Germanic root drew, which gives us the good old California live oak tree. Drew means oak tree. And an oak tree is a metaphor, it's a symbol of truth, because it is very hard wood. Its roots go deep in the ground. It's an evergreen tree. And the ancient Druids, that is during the Celtic period in old England, used to worship under an oak tree. Truthfulness is a universal moral virtue, one of the 5 precepts of Buddhism, followed by devotees and monastics alike. And at a little later period, one of the second in the fundamental prerequisites for the practice of Raja Yoga in Patanjali's yoga aphorisms, Yama and Niyama are the first 2 steps, but in the Yama, Ahimsa, Satyasteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. The second of those is truthfulness. Very important in this dark age of Kali. Sri Ramakrishna says truthfulness is the outstanding virtue of the Kali Yuga. Truthfulness is the tapasya, that is the spiritual practice of the Kali Yuga. The virtue of truthfulness means honesty. It means integrity. It means veracity. It means authenticity. And it means spirituality. Certainly we have to see that honesty is a universal moral value. All the people in the world, whatever their country or whatever their culture or whatever their time, value honesty. Honesty as a value. Everybody believes that you should tell the truth. Nobody believes that you should tell lies. And when we talk about honesty, well, we have to remember the first thing that comes to our mind is the father of our nation. That is George Washington. Now, when George Washington was a boy, when he was 8 years old, lived with his family at Mount Vernon on the banks of the Potomac River in Virginia. And there he lived with his father and family, a very large estate. We could call it like a plantation. They had a big manor house. Yes, they owned slaves there. Big fields of animals and crops that they grew. And on his 8th birthday, his father presented him with a politically incorrect birthday present, a hatchet. And, well, little George was so happy to get this shiny new hatchet. He immediately is just jumping up and down. He ran outside and he began to chop away at the kindling wood. Well, it so happens that that day, the father was going off on business. And he left the manor house, walked down the entrance avenue, looking to his right and to his left, admiring his prized collection there. He brought them, had them imported from different countries in Europe and England. That is, seedlings of different kinds of fruit trees, most importantly is cherry trees. So he's so proud of that row after row of these different varieties of cherry trees. He just planted some new ones at the far end. And so he set off there for the village to do some business. Meanwhile, George is chopping. All right, he ran out of kindling. Goes over, he started looking for something. There's an old bush. Went over, chopped that down very neatly. Then he went around, walking around, looking for something else. He came to that orchard, looked around, saw all those trees, walked down the long lanes of those trees. There it came to the end, there was a big cherry tree. Yeah, I can cut that down. He took his shiny new axe, he went over and chop, 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 he cut it down. And the tree fell, and he was so proud of himself. But then he thought, wait a minute, what have I done? This is my father's. He loves these trees. I'm in trouble. Now he realized, I'm in big trouble. And so now he's very much afraid, ran back to the house, crawled under the front porch. There he was hiding under the front porch. Just about that time that his father returned. Father returns, coming up the entrance avenue. He looks far there ahead. What does he see? He sees a tree. Well, it looks like it's on its side. It's laying down there. It's on its side. What happened? Goes over there. Someone has cut down his tree. Well, he's very vexed. He's very disturbed. His mind is upset. He goes back to the house, sits himself down on the front porch, and he's thinking aloud, what could have happened? Who cut down that tree? Why, if it was my neighbor, I'll have to take him to court and have him sued. And if it was one of our slaves, well, I'll have them all punished. He's thinking like this aloud. Meanwhile, George comes crawling out from under the front porch. Comes up his father. He's his father. He said, I have to tell you the truth. I cannot tell a lie. It was I who cut down your cherry tree. Yes, it was I, with my shiny new hatchet. And the father looked at him, and course, he was he was angry with the boy. But, he said to him, George, he said, I'm very angry with you for what you did, but I'm very proud of you for having told me the truth. It's a very good quality. It's a great virtue. And George was thinking, oh, yeah, does that mean I'm not going to be punished? Father said, well, no, that's not what it means. He said, you're going to take your hatchet, and you can cut the kindling and the firewood for the main house and for the servants' quarters through the rest of the winter. And so that was his punishment. There's another story in old India about a pious woodcutter. That is, he was a good woodcutter, and he was a hard-working, honest woodcutter. The honest woodman. He lived next door to a very dishonest and lazy woodman. Well, every day, the honest woodman would rise early in the morning. 5 in the morning, he'd leave the house. He'd go down and he'd go into the forest, look for some trees, and spend the day there cutting firewood to bring back late in the afternoon. Every morning when he passed on his way to work, he would pass by his neighbor's house. Neighbor was sleeping in late, and he would hear the sound of this guy. Why does he go out? Why does he go so early? Why he could sleep all morning? Like, there's no reason to go there too much later. So like that, he would sleep until late in the morning. And it so happened one day the honest woodman went into the forest. He went deeper and deeper, couldn't find a good tree for him to cut. Finally, he came to the banks of a river, kind of like a lake. And there by the lake, he saw a likely tree, and he began to cut that tree with his axe. As he did so, the axe slipped out of his hand, went flying through the air, and landed splash in the deep water of that lake. He was so annoyed with himself. So what am I going to do? He goes over to the side of the lake. He said that these are the tools, the only tool of his trade. He has to have that axe. How would he ever hope to get it prayed to the Divine Mother? Oh, Mother, please help me. Well, it so happens that there was in that lake had a presiding deity. That is, there was a devata who lived in the lake, and sure enough, as he raised his prayers to the Divine Mother, there rose out of the lake the Lady of the Lake. She said, "Yes, my son." I said, Here are your prayers. What is your problem? Oh, you lost the axe. Well, let me go see if I can find it. She dives down into the water, and when she comes up, she's holding a bright, shiny, golden axe. Is this your axe? And the honest woodman, he looks there. "No, Mother." He said, "That's not my axe." "Oh, you sure? Okay." And she goes down again in the water, comes up a moment later. Now she's holding a shining silver axe. "Is this your axe?" No, Mother." Try again. She goes down in the water. She comes up comes up there with his old iron axe. "Is this your axe, my son?" The woodman says, Yes, Mother, thank you so much, thank you. I appreciate." She came over. Yes, well, she laid on the banks of that lake. She laid the iron axe, and then she laid the silver axe, and then she laid the golden axe. She said, "My son, I'm very pleased with you. Take these back to your home as a gift from me." So he went back home, He was so happy, so joy, carrying that shining gold and silver axe, walking through. He came back to his house, called to his wife, came in, showed his wife that golden axe. She was stunned and amazed to see it. Meanwhile, the neighbor has heard this commotion outside. What's going on? He looks out and he sees all. He comes over to the window, looking and peering in through the window, and there he sees these three and he hears the story of what happened. The wheels start to turn in his brain. Thinks, yeah. He said, next morning, he said, I'm going to try. I know about where that happened. I'll try for myself. And the next morning, sure enough, he himself went into the forest, taking his iron axe, went through all those trees, came around to the lake, looked around, found the same spot. He pretended to be chopping away at a tree, and he threw his axe into the lake. And then, with crocodile tears streaming down his face, he prayed to the Divine Mother, Mother, please help me. I've lost my axe. Sure enough, out of the water, there rose the Lady of the Lake. Yes, my son, I hear your prayers. She said, I lost my axe. Let me see. She goes down in the water and she comes up holding his iron axe. Is this your axe, my son? The woodman looked there and thought, this is not the way the story went. No. He said, that's not my axe, not at all. I don't know where you got that from. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. She said, let me look again. She went down, came up with a silver axe this time. She said, this is not right. Is this your axe? No, he said, that's not my axe either. Try again. So she goes down, comes up, she's holding the shining golden axe. Is this your axe, my son? Yes, he says. Very good, thank you, give that to me. Well, then she laughed. She said, well, she's very vexed with him. She said, what is it, how are you telling, I'm very displeased with you. Slowly she sank down again into the water, taking with her all three axes. He was left with no more means of livelihood, and sadly returned home. Well, so that's the story. Honest woodman and the dishonest woodman. So honesty is a virtue. It's one of the virtues of truthfulness. Truthfulness is honesty. Truthfulness is veracity. Veracity is the same, at least etymologically, same as truth. Truth is the Germanic root, and the veracity is from the Latin root. But veracity in the colloquial English has a different meaning from just speaking the truth. Veracity also, because sometimes we can, that is, there's a difference when we're talking here about this virtue, observing the spirit and the letter of the law. That is, we all try to observe the spirit of the law, but veracity adds something to that and encourages the one to follow the letter of the law. That is, it's possible for us to say what we believe to be true, and yet perhaps we have got our facts wrong. Perhaps we are mistaken, and thus we utter a falsehood. And therefore the virtue of veracity is about telling the truth. As Aristotle says, truth is, what is truth? Truth means saying of that which is, that it is, and of that which is not, that it is not. Seems like it's a simple practice, and yet if we begin to, as students of karma yoga, if you are a practitioner of karma yoga, and if you practice thought karma and purifying thought karma and speech karma, as well as old-fashioned behavior karma, then you know how difficult it is to align your spoken words with the facts. How seldom it is that we check our facts. And that's why they say it's good to think twice before you speak once. Measure your words out like gold, which is the practice of karma yoga. And don't speak an untruth, even unknowingly. And well, that's a very high bar to that's like an impossible high ideal. But if you remember in the Mahabharata, in that famous, well, you remember the most famous episode there in the Bhagavad Gita, chariots are drawn up, it's the Kurukshetra war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The Bharatas are divided up into these two clans, the civil war. And on one side of the Pandavas, there are 5 brothers. And the eldest of these brothers, his name was Kshudira. And is that right? Is that his name? Yeah, I think so. He was known and famous for for always speaking the truth. Everyone knew that whatever he said was true, and he spoke with such honesty and veracity that he was known never to have uttered an untruth, as a result of which his chariot always rode 4 inches. Everybody else's chariot just went bumping along the ground. His chariot rode 4 inches off the ground. Well, it so happened that during that war, the Pandavas were, at one point, were being beaten. And the main reason that they were losing the battle was because there was a great archer. In fact, the guru of all the archers, his name was Drona. And Drona was such a great archer that he didn't just shoot 1 arrow or 5 arrows, or he shoots like 50 arrows, all in 1 minute. So nobody can even get even close to him he has to be killed in order for the battle to be won. But nobody can even get anywhere near him because he's just like a cloud of arrows that he's shooting everywhere. How can we get him to drop his bow just for a moment, just so he's vulnerable, just for a moment, so that we have an opportunity to strike? Well, they came up with a plan. He has a dear and beloved son. His name was Ashwatthama. If someone were to tell him that Ashwatthama, of course Ashwatthama is fighting on another front there of the battle, and he's alive and well, but if someone were to tell him that his son was killed, why certainly he would be devastated, certainly he would drop his bow and be vulnerable just at least for a moment. And but how can we do that? He would never believe anybody who told him that. He'd know that it was a trick. He said, well, yeah, but you see, if Yudhishthira, the eldest brother, if he were to tell him that, he knows that he's a paragon of truth, he would believe it. Yeah, but how can we get, well, then the debate upon the plan. The plan is that there is an elephant that has died. And it so happens that the elephant had a name. His name was Ashwatthama. And so the plan is that Yudhishthira goes over and he calls out, "Oh, Dronacharya, so happy to, sorry to inform you that Ashwatthama, the elephant, is dead." Hearing those words, Ashwatthama is dead, that's all he heard. Sure enough, Drona dropped his bow, became vulnerable. Immediately he was killed by the Pandavas. Pandavas won the war. And as the chariots left the field of battle, the battle was over. The Pandavas were the victors. Only one thing, now they saw that people noticed now, however, that Yudhishthira, that is his chariot, that great paragon of truth, his chariot now rode on the ground. And so just for that little white lie, that he'd fallen from that virtue, that pure virtue of veracity. And so that's the truthfulness. Truthfulness, honesty. Truthfulness is veracity. Truthfulness is, I'll give you the like synonyms. Truthfulness is integrity. Integrity means integrated. That is one. In integer, we use the word. That means a whole number, something which is whole, which is not a fraction. That's a whole. That's an integrated body. We can think of a person. An integrated person would be a person whose body, whose mind and heart, whose soul, whose spirit are all in alignment. And you can visualize circles, for example, concentric circles. And each one of those circles, as it goes out, we go from the whole self, body and mind, spirit. All of those are in alignment. That is one sphere of your life is not at war with another sphere. They're not clashing separately. They're all they all are together in one unified, nested holarchy. And that's why they say in India, when they see that there's a great holy man, they call him a Mahatma. A Mahatma is defined as manasikam vachasikam karmanika mahatmanam. That is, a Mahatma is one in whom the speech, your thoughts, your feelings, and your speech and your actions are all the same. This is the nature of a man of integrity. Of course, the greatest example, maybe, which we have of integrity is always going to be in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And you remember how on one occasion, I'll tell you one incident. Sometimes from these small incidents, we get like the tip of an iceberg, we get an insight into the whole character of the person. Sri Ramakrishna was visiting one devotee. His name was Shambhu Malik. Had a garden house in Dakshineshwar, which is the village near to where the Kali temple, where Ramakrishna lived. Visiting that devotee, and all in the afternoon they were talking, devotees had assembled there. And but Sri Ramakrishna was mentioned there that he sometimes suffered from upset stomach, from indigestion and colic. And Shambhu Malik there on his estate, he had a dispensary. And he knew a lot about folk remedies. Immediately he advised the master, he said, yes, he said, what you need to do is if you're suffering from indigestion, he said the best thing to do is to take some pills of opium. Pill means you take the opium, the juice from the opium extracted there, it's sticky, and you make a little ball of that, little black ball. And you can take one of those if you're upset stomach, and it soothes. He says, yes, you need to get some pills of opium. I have some, and I will give you some for your use. And the master agreed. He says, yes, thank you very much. And then they continued talking about soul, God, and religion through the afternoon, and both forgot about the incident. Later on in the late afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna took his leave from Shambhu Malik, and he set back for the temple of Dakshineshwar. He hadn't gone very far, hadn't even gotten to the entrance gate there when he remembered that opium. So he turned around. He went back to get the pills of opium, but he saw there that Shambhu Malik was very busy. Some guests had come, and he was deeply talking to them. Ramakrishna didn't want to disturb them. Nearby, just turned to there he's near the dispensary, asked the clerk in the dispensary about the opium, and immediately the clerk gave him those pills of opium, tied them in a corner of his cloth, and he set off again for the temple of Dakshineshwar. Well, he walked along, he's walking along, he said, what's this? This doesn't seem like the right road. He got a little confused, and he turned around, and there was the road back to Shambhu Malik's house. That's all very clear. And he felt kind of a magnetic pull going back in that direction. He said, no, I'm going back to the temple. Turned around, continued walking there. He looked, this doesn't look familiar. But am I on the wrong road? Turned around again, saw the road back to Shambhu Malik, felt a draw, a pull. He started walking in that direction. Then he realized, yes, I see what happened. You see, he had taken, I took those pills of opium from that clerk. That assistant, Shambhu Malik said that he was going to give me the medicine. And I agreed to take it from him. This is the way his mind is, his veracity. I'd agreed to take it from him. And so really, without getting permission, I took it from the clerk. That means this is theft. I'm guilty of theft. And so he immediately came back. By this time, everyone had left. There's no one around. He knocked on the door, no answer. The window was kind of partially open. He took that package of opium and he threw it in the window. He said, hello. He said, I'm returning your opium. And then his mind was free. Turned around, went back, easily returned again to Dakshineshwar. So that's the story. And it's a good illustration. And I told you it the best I could. But it's a story that's marked by the dialogic process, and you got like 3 different versions. So you look it up for yourself. So this is truthfulness. Truthfulness. And integrity. And truthfulness is authenticity. Authenticity is, well, it's kind of a buzzword nowadays, but authenticity is a word. It means being a genuine person. Not being a fake or a fraud. And you remember how in the Lila Prasanga, there's an incident, someone asked Swami Vedarupananda, they were discussing a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, where it says, among 1,000 people who struggle for spiritual enlightenment, maybe only one of those makes progress and they succeed. Commenting on that verse, Vivekananda says, yes, he says that he would estimate that maybe about 5% of all spiritual, and that is to say, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's very generous. It says that 1 out of 1,000. Actually, maybe it's 1 out of 1 million is a person who actually strives to realize spiritual truth. And of those, maybe only one actually reaches and realizes the truth. This is why Swami Vivekananda gave these numbers. He said, well, maybe in spiritual practice, maybe 5% of people make some progress and succeed. 15% go mad. And the other 85% end up as cheats and frauds and hypocrites. That was his analysis. So, well, we can kind of see where we fall, somewhere where, as far as being sincere, honest, spiritual aspirants. But authenticity is the value here, kind of like in this truthfulness. Authenticity, it's a word, of course, that came into popularity not that long ago, made popular by the French existentialists, came in to be used as a term of art. And the existentialists use that term to refer, saying that a person should be an individual, should always speak and act in a way that is consistent with his beliefs and with his convictions, and if he failed to do so, that he was guilty of bad faith. That's existentialist terminology. Authenticity, more generally, just means letting go of trying to be who you think that you're supposed to be, and being, that is confirming and embracing the person, who you really are. We could say that's being who you are. Remember in the Greek mythology, all of the gods had a message for mankind. Zeus gave them a commission to the message delivered by Apollo and Dionysius. The message of Apollo was, know thyself. And the teaching of Dionysius was, be thyself. So these are the two teachings here. These are Vedantic teachings. Know thyself and be thyself. That is, to be who you really are, to be an authentic person. Well, it takes, of course, a lot of courage to know. First we have to know who we really are, and to be true to our spiritual self requires a lot of courage. Most of us, as adults, committed to being our persona, our public self, find it to be a very difficult practice to do. Sometimes we see a better example maybe in the lives of children. And you remember the old story about the emperor's new clothes. How there was this emperor who he wasn't a very good emperor. He took no thought about the ruling of the kingdom. He was so proud and vain. All he thought about was clothes. He loved his clothes, and he had every day he wore a new suit of clothes. He had visiting various clothes shops and engaged special tailors to make him new clothes. That was his obsession. What so happened one day, into that kingdom, into that town, there came 2 tailors. And those tailors, they were selling a new kind of cloth. Oh, such a wonderful, most beautiful cloth ever made anywhere in this kingdom. It was such beautiful colors. It was such a fine style, and it was only worn by the most successful and wonderful people. It was magical cloth. And of course, there was one caveat. If you were not, you had to, everyone who was honest and who was moral and who was a person of good taste and who was a good subject of the king, they could easily appreciate this cloth. But there were a few people who were dishonest. immoral, and who were disloyal to the king, their eyes would be clouded by this magical properties of this cloth. They could not see it. Well, these two tailors, they went around showing their wares to different people in the city. Everyone stopped. They looked, yeah, very good. Everyone seemed to admire the cloth, and the word began to travel around that this beautiful, magical cloth was being sold. Soon the king heard about it. He had those tailors brought immediately. They came in and they held up their wares. Of course, they were frauds. Of course, they were imposters. Of course, all the fabric was all just good mimicry. Of course, the cloth was, but they held up this invisible cloth there to the king, and held it this way. He said, "See the colors, Your Majesty, see the cut of it, how wonderful, what a fine cloth it is." Yes, said the king. He'd heard the story about the people who couldn't see it, so yes. So he also admired it, yes. "Make me some clothes out of that," which they did. And sure enough, one day, scheduled, "I'm so good, this is such wonderful clothing." Everyone was praised, well, it's parade through the town. And so there he set off with his retinue, parading through the town, clad only in his magic clothes. As he walked down the streets, everyone admiring his clothes, till what? He heard the crowd, or a little voice of a little boy. Little boy said, "Hey, Father," he said, "he's not wearing any clothes." And soon a few laugh. You hear a little laughter back in the crowd. Another laughter. For people realize what the boy said. The boy's right. He said the truth. So pretty soon, laughter began to carry throughout that whole crowd of people. All everyone began. There, the king said. There, he realized what a fraud had been exposed, and. So there he was, and it was only that boy, was not yet old enough to form that public persona that kind of just spoke what was the truth. And so he spoke with some authenticity. That's authenticity. One fine day, truth met falsehood on the banks of a river, and they fell to talking, and they both talking, and they seemed to be very nice. Falsehood seemed to be a very nice person. And when she suggested to truth, she said, "Why don't we go for a swim in the river here?" And truth thought, "Yes, it's a very hot day. You're right, I think it's a good idea." All right, so they left their clothes, draped over a bush by the side of the river, waded into the river, and there they splashed and they talked and they swam and they had a good time. Until falsehood said, "Well, you stay here in the water." Said, "I'll go out and wait for you on the bank." She waded out of the water, quickly looking around. She picked up the clothes of truth, put them on her own self, and immediately walked away down the road and into the nearby village. And as she walked through the streets, people came out and they say, "Oh, what fine clothes, how well you're dressed, how nice you look today. Welcome. You're welcome to walk through our town." Meanwhile, poor Truth, there she is in the water. She comes out of the water. And what does she see? There her clothes. Only the clothes of falsehood are on the bush. What could she do? She was Truth. She couldn't put on the clothes of falsehood. So clad in her old sky-clad walking bear, she walked through the street, walked away. What could she do? She wandered away. She too wandered down into the village, nearby streets of the village. She came in. People came out. Oh, they were so shocked, and they were so angry. What is it? How terrible? You see, how is it that you're walking through these streets? They were so shocked to see the naked truth. They drove her out of town. And they drove her out. She had to go hiding now in the forest. Maybe she's hiding still in that dark forest, afraid to show her face. Meanwhile, falsehood, walking through whatever town, being praised for her fine clothes. So, well, that's authenticity. And different versions of the value of truthfulness. Truthfulness is a value. Truthfulness is a virtue. Truth is a value. Let's talk a little about the truth, the value. In academia today, especially in philosophy departments, truth is kind of an open question. If truth is discussed at all, it is labeled as something which is relative, or which is subjective, or which is socially constructed, or which is redundant, or which, if you're studying Friedrich Nietzsche, doesn't exist at all. No such thing as truth. But in Vedanta, the teaching about truth, that is, the Vedantic teaching about truth, is all about foundationalism. That is to say, truth, with a capital T, has a sacred value. And that value, that is that foundationalist teaching, that essentialist teaching, finds expression in the metaphysics, in the epistemology, in the ethics, and in the aesthetics of the Vedanta philosophy. Truth is, at least in ancient Greek philosophy, of course, is considered to be one of the three ultimate, universal values, one of the three great Platonic forms: truth, goodness, and beauty, known thousands of years before in the Upanishads, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. These are the three, we could call them the three faces of God. So truth is a great universal, eternal, objective moral value. But in addition, truth is considered truth in Vedanta goes further than that. And the truth is not just a value, it is a name of the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality in Vedanta is called Brahman. And Brahman is described, the fundamental descriptors of Brahman: Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, that is truth. It's defined as Sat. Sat, Sanskrit word, is the word of Satyam, is the word of Satyata, that's authenticity. It's the word of Satta, that's the same root, goes through all those words of truth and truthfulness, and truth as a name of the ultimate reality. So we can say, we can ask ourselves the question, why should we tell the truth? We know it's a virtue. Everyone may agree that it is a virtue, but we have to maybe argue with our impulsive inner child, whoever it is, does not want to tell the truth. That aspect of ourselves that maybe does not want to tell the truth, we have to convince ourselves as to why should I tell the truth. Granted, it's a value, okay, but why should I tell the truth? Well, most obvious maybe is just it has certainly a pragmatic, immediate pragmatic value. The truth condition is the prerequisite for every time we utter a sentence, every time we make a statement. Every speech act has begins with a truth condition. That's just part of the language game that we speak, so that every time that we speak falsely, we make a false move in that game. And that is not good, because that's a karmic act. That is that's the glue. It's truth is the glue that holds society together. If you're in business, you say true in the long run. We know that honesty is the best policy. That's all. It's pragmatics. Certainly we can say, why should we tell the truth? Well, we have to understand, of course, that it's very crucial for our mental health, that is for our psychological health, because truth is essential for our self-respect. And lying damages our self-esteem. That's just psychology. As you know, what happened to that little boy, would-be real boy, Pinocchio. He used to tell lies. And what happened to him? Nose began to grow longer and longer. That is, he has a whole body. He became kind of disfigured. And you remember how in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, he used to be a close student of physiology, physiognomy, phrenology, could know a lot just by looking at a person. One day, one of his disciples, Rakhal, he was just a boy at that time, maybe he was 14, he's a young boy, unspoiled by the world, came into the room. Sri Ramakrishna used to enjoy and love his presence. But on that particular day, he looked closely. He said, Rakhal, he said, "What have you been telling lies?" He said, "There's a cloud over your face." And the boy said, "What?" He said, "No, they could not." No, Sri Ramakrishna, "No, your face, it looks a little dark to me." He says, "Think." He said, "Think back." Then he began to think. Then he remembered, that morning he'd been talking to his grandmother, told his grandmother a white lie. That couldn't have mattered. He mentions that Sri Ramakrishna then told him, so don't. Because you see, it disturbs the whole visage of the look. It changes the look in your face. Your face didn't look so fresh and innocent as it did before. So lads, it damages our self-esteem. Certainly we know. Why should we tell the truth? Well, certainly we know. It's a universal moral virtue. And that is that it's universal moral. Why is it moral? It's called moral. Things are moral. An action is moral if it's pleasing to God. Why are truth statements are pleasing to God? Why? Because God is defined as the Logos. That is, God is the principle. of law and of reason that governs the whole universe, and that there is a maxim of reason. That is, there is a categorical imperative. The imperative is that you do your duty, which is to tell the truth. To speak an untruth is irrational. Rationality presupposes truth. In order to be rational, you have to speak. You have to know the facts. You can't have rationality without facts. You can't have facts without those statements which correspond to reality. That means which are true. And so truth is a moral virtue, but certainly a real reason, the ultimate reason why we are committed to the truth here is because it's the only way that we can be happy is to be who we really are. The reason why we suffer in life is because we are identified with our false self. And the way to happiness is to follow the thread of truth, that is with a small t, leads that thread. Following that will lead us to truth with a capital T, and will enable us to realize the truth of our true nature. Om Dyo Shantihi Antariksha Shantihi Prithvi Shantihi Apa Shantihi Oshadaya Shantihi Vanaspataya Shantihi Vishwe Deva Shantihi Brahma Shantihi Saravam Shantihi Shantireva Shantihi Same Shantirehi Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Om. Peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all.